And they think, oh, if I have all this infrastructure in place, I won't have to do the basics. And sadly, the basics is asking people, will they buy your stuff?
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Jo is interviewing Julie Creffield. Julie was introduced to us by Heather Waring from show number 172. Julie is a community engagement strategist and business mentor who has been building Tribe online and off for more than 25 years. As a single mum, she grew up her plus-size fitness blog, Too Fat to Run, into a globally recognised coaching business and has helped millions of women worldwide to improve their physical and mental well-being. With a passion for bringing people together around a common cause, she now helps small business owners create their own movements that matter and is on a mission to create an army of compassionate leaders. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Julie Creffield. Welcome, Julie. Thanks for joining me.
Hey.
Tell us, to begin with, who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
Sure. So I am Julie Creffield. I am a community engagement strategist and business coach, and I love communities. I love bringing people together, and I'm based in Stratford in East London.
Oh, lovely. So not too far away from me, as I was saying before we came on, at the other end of the high speed that they said would stop just up the road, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I could still get you in, like, I think 40 minutes or something, so that's not too bad. Yeah. And my daughter's desperate to go to your shopping centre.
Yeah, well, it was quite, because I've lived in this area a long time, and when Westfield come along,
yeah,
it was quite a cultural change, you know, to have places that we could go out for food and a cinema and stuff like that. So I'm definitely not complaining, although I don't go there that often now.
No, exactly. So tell us a bit about how your business came about. I often say to my guests, did you want to do this when you left school? And most of my guests, it's the sort of job that we didn't know existed, back in the day. And I think yours is probably similar. But I know there's an interesting story to your early days as well. So tell us more.
Sure. So it's easy on reflection to look back and see all the telltale signs. But you're right. At school, there wasn't a job like the one that I do now. But I've always loved bringing people together, which is odd because I come from a really big family. There were 6 kids. And so you would think that would be enough, and that I would never get bored of people. But I was very different to my siblings, was probably too ambitious for my own good. And I was quite smart and interested in lots of things. So I was always trying to find interesting people who had similar interests to me. Mm-hmm. So I was always kind of bringing, the kids in off the street to do different projects, and I'd create little clubs, and, it's hardly any wonder I do the work that I do now when I look at the type of kid that I was back then. Mm-hmm. But I was quite a naughty kid as well. So at school, I was told I wasn't very academic, and my only subject that I really liked at school was drama. So I just went down that route. I did a BTEC in drama and just did very kind of practical courses, and never thought I'd go to uni or anything like that. And then a tutor said, why are you not going to uni? You're very smart. And so I ended up going to university, the first person from my family, and I got a first-class degree. And so it's interesting that to be told you're not academic and then to go on and do that and then to get a master's afterwards, yeah. I was academic. I just wasn't challenged in the right way. Yeah. And so the early part of my career was around kind of using the arts to help engage various communities in making sense of the lives that they had, really. So I'd go into schools and community groups and worked with all sorts of kind of at-risk young people, and help them tell their stories, whether that was through filmmaking or drama or dance or photography. A real kind of mixed bag, really. And I did that for a number of years, working for various different organisations as a freelancer. And then the Olympics came to town, and all of these contracts fell in my lap that were all to do with community engagement around the games. And it didn't take long for me to become a games time expert, which, you definitely can't go to university for that. So I worked for about 8 years on the Olympics, was very much involved in the policy making for the Games Maker programme, making sure that workforce really was representative of London and not just the rich white people from, the home counties that could afford to do it. And then I got made redundant. So I got made redundant the day after the opening ceremony. Which
goodness!
Bit of a kick in the teeth. And I was also 7 months pregnant with my daughter, my first child. So it was a real kind of roller coaster of emotions, really. And I felt quite lost after that, because I'd worked on the games for such a long time and had this identity around it. And I was a bit like, God, what am I going to do? Like, I've got a small child to look after, and I've got, I can't freelance in the way that I used to. It was a real challenging time. But I'd set up a couple of years prior, I'd set up a running blog, and it was never supposed to be a business. I was never supposed to make any money from it. But I was interested in running a marathon at some point and kept coming last in races. So I was like, let me write a blog about it. And by the time I'd been made redundant from my job, it had actually got quite a bit of traction. And so about 6 months after I'd had my daughter, I thought, I wonder if I can turn that blog into a business. And so that's what I did. I got a loan from the job centre, and I grew that business into a 6-figure coaching business, which had kind of clients all over the world and got featured on the telly and, all that kind of fun stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was, speaking about it like in that way, it sounds like it happened really quickly and smoothly and all of those things. And of course it never does, but it was a real roller coaster.
Yes, yeah. But also, let's just get this right. You created a business by coming last, in effect.
Yes.
So that's not how most people start businesses, and certainly, they're not the attitude, or people's attitudes to coming last quite often isn't what apparently yours was. Tell us more about how that happened.
So I think, I'm not sure if I had come last previous to this, but this is the big one. I'd gone to a local race in a park near me, didn't know anything about the race. I just knew it was local. And when I got there, I realised the mistake I'd made. It was a race that had been organised by the running club attached to the park. And so everyone there looked super, super speedy. And I was like, oh, God, this is going to be embarrassing. But I thought, look, just give it a go. Like, what's the worst that could happen? And it turns out the worst that could happen is you get to the finish line and the finish line is packed up and everyone's gone home. So that is what had happened. And I had a mixture of emotions. Firstly, I was like hugely embarrassed. And then a little bit angry, like I'd paid good money for this race. And, from a health and safety perspective, it wasn't very good and all of that. But then by the time I got home, I could see the funny side of it. And it was that afternoon that I set up the blog as a bit of a joke, just to kind of write about what had just happened.
And what was the blog called?
The Fat Girl's Guide to Running.
Ah.
Yeah. And so, this idea of you've got to come first to be a winner in life, I just think is a really unhelpful narrative.
Yeah.
Because that was the narrative I had at school. So, if you don't get all the top grades, then you're not worth anything. In the workplace, it's the same. You've got the achievers and then everybody else is, useless.
Yes.
And I just think leadership can look very different. And I'm writing a book at the moment called Leading from the Back. And it's about all of these issues around kind of failure and not having to be at the front all the time to be deemed useful in life.
It's so topical with all the discussion around diversity and inclusion as well, because a lot of the narrative around diversity is around race and sex and all the sort of obvious stuff, if you like. But actually there's a whole other undercurrent of exactly what you've just said, which is sort of stereotypes of what success looks like, and how you be the leader, as you say. And I love the title that you've just shared. And I do wonder if the pandemic and the fact that people have changed how they work and so on. I mean, we were saying before we started that life hasn't changed that much for us, other than in a positive business sort of way. But, you know, people working in different ways, you know, people have to influence from a distance now that they didn't have to, and whether actually some of what you're going to be sharing is actually really of the moment.
I think it has been a leveler in some ways. I think some of the trappings of, you know, office politics and how you socialise outside of work and some of those things will definitely make it more of an equal playing field. But it's this thing around having to put on a front, having to always have this thought of, how do I do well? How do I progress? How do I be seen to be somebody who has potential? You know, how do I change my accent? How do I dress appropriately? How do I be seen to have the right hobbies? And it's this dumbing down in order to get success. And what I've found to be true, the more I lean into who I really, really am, like really, really am, like the bad bits too, that's when I get the success. Like, it's been a phenomenal awakening for me. You know, the more I embrace my accent, the way I appear, all of the bad things that have, you know, the so-called bad things that have happened in my life, it gives other people permission to go, do you know what? I'm also making excuses. Those excuses of, oh, I can't be a successful life coach or business coach unless I live in a big house, or unless I have a husband, or unless I look this way or speak this way, and it's just about challenging those ideas and in some ways taking personal responsibility. Yes, those constraints are out there and it can be hard to push against them, but some of the biggest barriers are the ones that we have in our own head. Absolutely. And I think the lockdown and all of those kind of things really made me relook at what I would accept for my life. Yes.
And we were saying before we came on, as I said, that this has been a great year for you in terms of business. And we were saying that, you know, it's difficult to have those or say those things in the current climate because so many people have been so, you know, awfully affected by the situation, but also that it's important to celebrate the successes and actually show people that, you know, things are still possible and it's not all doom and gloom and so on.
Yeah.
Do you think the challenge of the sort of environment has driven some of that success, or was it just the timing?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of those things. I think there was an element of, I had decided at the beginning of this year that this was the year that all of the stuff I'd been working on was going to fall into place, and I was going to leverage all of the work that I'd done the past 5 years. So I'd already made the decision that this would be the year that I would double my income. And that was one goal. It was one part of what I wanted to do this year. And then when coronavirus started to unfold, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you, like, seriously, the year that I've got everything going for me, a global pandemic is going to come and like ruin it. And I kind of allowed myself to have like a 24-hour wobble where I cried and said it's not fair and journaled ferociously. And then the next day I woke up and said, no, I'm not going to let that make any difference to my plan. And what it helped me to do was get really clear on my mission. And by really communicating that mission, all of a sudden people were like, actually, Julie was onto something. Because I've been talking about building communities online for the last, 5-6 years. And everyone was like, yeah. Like, it's a nice to have. And then the moment everyone was online and tried to sell their stuff and realized they didn't have an audience, they were like, oh, maybe this tribe building stuff, there's something more to it. I think there was a combination of more demand for the services that I offer. But I also think it was the fact that I didn't shy away from it. I wasn't embarrassed to sell my stuff. I didn't discount. I didn't give free places away. I was really clear on, this is the value I have. If you're serious about pivoting your business, leveraging what you've already got, let's work together.
Yes.
You know, and the people that stepped forward were the ones that have absolutely thrived during this time. And I think in every economic downfall, in every disaster, there are always people that come out of it okay. And we've got to get away from that being unethical.
Yes. Yeah.
Because there will be need, you know, and I think in some ways it's just about deciding that there are opportunities everywhere, always.
I do think I was talking with my guest from a couple of weeks ago about the concept of being intentional, and I think for me that's what the pandemic and the lockdown did. I got ridiculously busy. You know, I've said on the podcast on many occasions, where everyone else seemed to be learning a new language or knitting yogurt, I didn't feel like I'd got a moment to myself to do anything, and then wondered how I, you know, used to fit my life into it before. But I do feel like I cleared stuff out, and I got really intentional about what was important and what I needed to do, and I stopped faffing around with the stuff that was getting in the way, because it just, I guess, felt far less important given what was going on in the world, sort of thing.
And I think for me, I'm a single parent. I've got a 7.5-year-old. She needs school. There's no two ways about it. I could not homeschool her. It was just a ludicrous idea. In fact, on the last day of school, she cried, and I was like, oh, you know, what's wrong? And she said, I don't want to be homeschooled because you can't do maths. And, you know, maths is her favourite subject. So she was genuinely, you know, traumatized. And it was hard keeping her occupied. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment. There's no outdoor space, and keeping, you know, a kid that's into gymnastics and dance and all of that occupied and happy, while also trying to run 2 businesses that were both growing and both needing my attention. It was hard. And I think it did make me super, super intentional. It was like, I am not responding to emails. That was the first thing that went. I'm not responding to emails. It takes too long. I combined all of my coaching calls into one day. And there are certain things that I, you know, even though she's gone back to school, I haven't picked up, because I was like, they didn't make any difference to my business. All this stuff that I thought I had to do, I clearly didn't. And I got really clear on what are the things that make me successful in my business, and let me just do more of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly what I was doing. And can I say, I was thinking of you. I didn't know anybody who had an apartment in London, but I kept saying to people, it's all well and good, you know, me having a garden and stuff. I said, but the people who haven't got gardens with children at home, they must be really, you know, up against it, trying to run businesses and everything else. But I didn't know anybody, so I'm glad we've now met Julie.
Well, do you know what? It was tough. And I'll tell you why. I was training for the London Marathon in the lead up to lockdown, and obviously it got cancelled. And for me, for my mental health, I need to get outside of the house, to get away from my child, to, you know, to get into nature and all of those things. That was one of the hardest things for me, was that I couldn't exercise and I couldn't get away from my child. And that sounds awful, but that was the honest truth. And it got to the point where I would go and have a bath in the middle of the day, because that was the only viable excuse to get out of the front room and not watch, you know, children's TV. But it did give us our relationship is stronger, you know, and we did make space we have a tiny little balcony, and we made that our oasis, and we got a little hammock, and, you know, we just used the space in a very, very different way to what we have done previously. And I took to running in my underground car park. And which, you know, and at one point I live streamed a 5k race or a 5k run, and Rose was giving me my snacks and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know, you've got to find the adventure where you can, right?
I can, everything you've said so far, you know, we've only been speaking sort of 20 minutes. I can see that you do that at every opportunity. That's such a good example. So you mentioned 2 businesses.
Yes.
Tell me.
So Two Fat to Run is my plus size fitness business. That's 10 years old. That turned 10 a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it feels like I'm just getting started with that. Like, I've got a big vision to train up coaches, using a kind of license model, and to really help people see what health and happiness looks like when you live in a bigger body. So it's a really unique fitness business, because the focus isn't just on the physical fitness. We talk a lot about mental health and well-being, and mindset. So that's one business. And then the other business is I work as a business coach. So I help small business owners to grow profitable tribes around their business. So I show them basically what I did with Too Fat to Run, but I also bring in all of the community engagement strategies from offline. There's a lot of coaches teaching online stuff, but actually there's a lot of stuff around influence and leadership that you can learn from real groups out there, rather than just these kind of online communities. Yes,
I think that's a really valuable sort of addition to the tribe community building stuff, which people have been talking about ever since social media came along, as if that's the only place that you've ever been able to do it.
And you can get really trapped in the tech. Like, you can get really trapped in you've got to have a funnel, and you've got to have this, and you've got to have this, and actually people are people, like whether they're on Facebook or in your front room, people's behaviors, the way they think. And that's what we're talking about on social media. They are not just pixels, they are human beings behind those pixels. And so when you think about online businesses in that way, it helps you to connect more with them and what they need, and you and what you need.
So how do you integrate the fact that you've got two businesses and a life and prioritize between them? Because that is often the key, isn't it? That's sort of, how do you decide what's most important in the moment to do that thing? And that's even when you've only got one business and one life, never mind two businesses.
I'd like to say I have a system. I don't really. I have a flow. I would say there's a flow to my business. So the running business is very much dictated by the seasons and things that are in the running calendar. So traditionally between Christmas and April, I am really focused on the running business and really busy in that business because of the London Marathon and all the kind of new year, new start and all of that kind of stuff. The summer, it tends to go quiet. It picks up a little bit in September again. So there is this kind of ebb and flow of that business. And because of the way I grew it, it doesn't belong to me. The community isn't my community, it's their community. So actually, I just facilitate that business now. I don't do a lot of work on it. And in fairness, I probably need to find a business partner to help ramp things up a little bit, because it has very much been ticking along. And during lockdown, I made the decision to not be actively selling in that community. So I devised a free of charge program called Thrive Inside, which was a bit of payback really, because those clients had helped to grow my business and get me out of the situation I'd found myself in. And I felt like it was the right thing to do, to offer something back during a time where they didn't really want to be paying for fitness stuff online, but desperately still needed it. And so I focused on the business coaching, which I know to be more profitable and easier for me to deliver.
And how do you then integrate that with the life bit of it? And I appreciate the last few months have been different, and with homeschooling, slightly different life too. Obviously, things are starting to change now. Schools are open again, all that sort of thing. How is that? How do you do that? I mean, it's not really about how it is to do with the pandemic, but how do you generally, bearing in mind you work from home, sort of integrate things?
It's tough. It's tough. Like it's not to say I don't have a life, but I love my work. I love my work. And so a lot of my social life is connecting with business buddies, clients, particularly in the Professional Speakers Association, which I'm a part of. A lot of my really dear friends are also in the business. And so I don't know, like, I love to travel. That's been the big, that's been the big thing that I've missed this year, is I tend to work really intensively and then take a heap of time off and go and travel. That's like the way I live my life. And that has been really challenging, not being able to escape and have some downtime. But I think for me, now that I feel like I've escaped the feast and famine of growing an online business, it's where I want to focus my attention, because there's no point in becoming a 6-7 figure coach if all you ever do is work, or you don't make time for dating or travel or reading or all of those things. So I don't know how I would have juggled it if we weren't in lockdown, because prior to lockdown I didn't actually enjoy spending much time in my apartment. So unless I was working, I was out. Whereas now I don't want to go out. Like, even if I can, I'm not that keen. So I think something has to change for me now. And I think because I have had such a good year, like financially, I can breathe a little bit and make some decisions about what my next steps are.
Yeah. So how do you work with your clients? If we think about the sort of business coaching, what does that look like? What does that make your days look like?
Yeah, I am a massive fan of group programs, so facilitated coaching and training, which is kind of different to an online course. I'm not a massive fan of online courses because statistics show that, less than 20% of people actually complete them. And I think that leaves people feeling like, oh, I've wasted my money, or I just never really reached it. I never got what I thought I would get from it. And I think that adds to kind of low self-esteem as a business owner, if I'm being honest. So I like fully facilitated programs which have a beginning and an end, and the community aspect is a major part of it. So most of the work that I do is in that format. I've got a program called Tribe Builder. I've got a program called One to Many. I have a membership called the Fellowship, and that's where graduates go after they've been on one of my programs. I do have some one-to-one clients, but not a lot, and I tend to work with them on quite an intensive basis rather than ad hoc one-off calls, if that makes sense. And groups are my thing. I just love bringing people together and just facilitating the magic, so I don't ever describe myself as a coach, really. Well, I do, because it helps people to understand what I do, but I'm part teacher, part mentor, part facilitator, part coach, depending on what my clients need.
Yeah. And I guess, when you were talking right from the beginning about tribes and communities, not having a group program wouldn't fit, would it?
Absolutely. But there's this thing, like, I had this motto, nobody left behind. And so it's, when I was running my plus size fitness business, I didn't want to be the figurehead of it. I didn't want to be the leader, like, oh, everybody follow me, I'm wonderful, which is quite ego driven. I really wanted to, and I don't know, the words sound a bit weird, but I really did want to empower the members to step up and to take a lead and to be part of, the team. And I think I do have quite an, utopian view of what online communities can become. And I don't think I'll ever lose that, because, some of my most dearest friends are people that I've met on the internet.
So what about some top tips for community building for people who are listening?
Sure. I always say it starts with you. Like, you can have all the best tech, you can have, throw money at Facebook ads, but if you haven't got a clear idea on the type of leader you are, and if you're not able to show up fearlessly visible, like warts and all, then you're really going to struggle to bring people with you. Because leading a tribe is exactly that. You're taking them somewhere, and you have to be able to communicate where you're taking them, why you're taking them, what's going to be great when you get there, and why you're the right person to do it. And if you don't have clarity over that, then there is this disconnect, and people understand you're building a tribe to make money from us.
Yes.
And that is what a lot of the internet marketers are talking about. Grow your social media tribe to sell to them. And that is not what I'm talking about. Yes, I believe we should be able to make money in our businesses, but I think that there's something beyond that. So I think it definitely starts with you and your kind of leadership capability. I think there's also something around the simplicity of building a tribe. You don't need all the whizzy tech. You don't need graphic design skills. You don't need all of those things. They are like the icing on the cake. If you have them, great. but we can use the excuse of, oh, I don't know how this works and I can't do this and I can't do that. Tribes are built around simple ideas. One of the simple ideas that I had after I had my daughter was that I can't do races anymore because I've got a small child at home, but I still want something to train towards. What if we could race virtually? What if I could race with all my clients all over the world and us have something to train towards, something to celebrate, and something to kind of acknowledge the community? So I come up with a virtual race called One Big Fat Run, and around 10,000 women have taken part. It's probably more now, I've stopped counting, but thousands of women all over the world have taken part in that race. And that was back in the day when I had no tech skills, no graphic design skills, didn't know how it would work. I designed a flyer on PowerPoint. I mean, that was the extent of my tech skills. But people buy into an idea. And so I think we can complicate things, and we can think, oh, I can only be successful once I have all of these things in place. And we're afraid to muck up. We're afraid to have bad graphic design. We're afraid to have websites that are not great. My website's not great. I should probably invest in a better one. But I know what's going to bring me in more income and more impact is not having a better website.
And often people can do things like that, a website, a logo, whatever, actually as a form of procrastination and lack of confidence. Yeah,
absolutely. And your niche changes. So if I had spent money on my website 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be spending it all over again because my niche and my messaging and my targeting has kind of changed. And so a lot of people spend money at the wrong time in their business before they're making enough sales. And they think, oh, if I have all this infrastructure in place, I won't have to do the basics. And sadly, the basics is asking people, will they buy your stuff? And so many people don't want to do the sales. It's the scary bit, right? And unless you, it's what I run a sales challenge 3 times a year for exactly that reason. I'm like, there's no point in building a tribe if you can't activate them to buy from you. And yes, it's scary, and I don't think it ever stops being scary.
No, exactly.
Because it's about rejection, right? That's what it is. When we get a no from someone, it's them saying, I don't want you, which is rubbish. It's not to do with that, but that's what we make it be about.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the questions that I got from you when I said, what shall I ask you? None of which I've asked so far, was, why does kindness matter?
Oh, yeah. This is a new thing. Well, it's not new. It's not new for me, but I'm talking about it more. I just know that the online world can make you feel unwell. And what I mean by that is there's so much noise. We can get triggered. We can get really triggered by what other people are doing. Like, we think we've got something great, and then we spot somebody else that does something similar, and now we're like, oh, I don't think it's that great anymore. And there are loads of like miscommunication and disagreements and little, business relationships that go sour. And because we're online, we don't feel like we have to address them. We'll just go, oh, I'll ignore that person online forevermore. And so I just think we are being whipped up into a frenzy at the moment, and we're not being very kind either to ourselves or to each other. And so I'm on a bit of a kind of mission really to help, just to help people make sense of what's going on, to notice it, to find strategies, just to kind of deploy a bit of self-care really around the triggering that happens, the negative emotional triggers that we get from social media. And it's not just social media, because it's other things beyond that. It's not just scrolling through Facebook or being upset because you don't have any likes. It's a little bit deeper than that. I think it's more to do with the business relationships and how we get triggered even by our business buddies. Right? And it's just kind of having a better understanding of what those triggers mean, how we can minimize them, and how we can be more committed as business leaders to put kindness like ahead of profit. And I know that sounds really like utopian, but it is something I really care about.
Yes. Yeah, no, agreed. I mean, a couple of things. One of them, I'm with you on that. It's the thing I kept repeating as we were going into lockdown, that, you know, be kind to ourselves and other people, because, you know, that's the only thing that's going to carry us through, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But also, you know, being in the HR sort of space around employee engagement, it's the thing that the HR teams are working on so much and have been since it happened, because the whole mental health thing and so on is so important. They might not call it kindness, and they may not say they're putting that ahead of profit, but they're having to put well-being and mental health right at the centre of everything, because there's no way to move forwards if they don't do that.
Yeah. And I think what's funny is that, I don't know, I'm going to launch a free Facebook group on World Mental Health Day that is around kind of kindness. And I know that people are going to laugh. They're going to go, you, kindness? And they won't get it, because I am a little bit like Bolshe, and I am down to earth and straight to the point, and I don't mince my words. But at the heart of it, I do that because I care desperately.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes I am quite tough on my clients when I see them doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, we were here 3 months ago with you not wanting to put your prices up. And in the moment, it can feel like that's really mean, but actually it's not. It's being really kind, because no one else has got the courage to say it to you. And so often we mistake kindness. We're like, oh, somebody asked for something for free. The kind thing to do is to say yes. No, the kind thing is to suggest that they go off and make the money and pay for it properly, because otherwise they'll always be looking for freebies, you know, and so sometimes we are kind to everybody else to the detriment of our own mental health, physical health, and the health of our businesses. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was posing questions to myself yesterday about boundaries.
Gosh, yes.
So last couple of questions, Julie. Firstly, what about those days where it all goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those days?
Oh, and it does so frequently. So last night was a perfect example of this. I'm in launch at the moment, and I'm doing a 5-day challenge. And yesterday was the day that I send out the email that says, bye now. And so I did that and was like, quite chuffed with myself. And then I got a message that said that Kajabi, which is the platform that I use for all my courses, had gone down like globally, right? No. So across the world, no one can get into any of their programs. And so the link that I'd sent everybody to wasn't working. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. And normally I would freak out, but I am a little bit more zen these days. And I was like, what are the lessons? As hard as it was, I was like, what are the lessons? And, you know, some of the lessons were about kind of future-proofing your business for things like that. And also, like, will it make a big difference to my launch numbers? I don't think it will. I could make it be about that, you know. So I just use a lot of kind of, I guess they are like mindfulness techniques and, you know, positive affirmations and stuff like that. I have to trick myself into thinking more positively sometimes. And I am an avid swearer, so I'll have a good old swear first, and then I'll think, right, let me grab my journal and some, you know, some cards. I'll pull a card or something. You know, I'm a real mix match of down to earth, like grafter, and then I am a little bit woo as well. So I just find, and sometimes I just go out for a walk. Like if things are really bad, I'm like, right, let me go for a walk, or I jump on my Peloton bike. Sometimes I have to get out of my head and into my body. That's a big thing for me. And that was the hardest thing in lockdown, was not being able to be physical.
Yes. Yeah. Peloton. We considered getting one of those during lockdown. We ended up with a less Rolls Royce version.
I love my Peloton. It was my treat to myself. And actually, by the time it arrived, we were coming out of lockdown. But I did. One of my friends was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer just before Christmas, and I was supposed to do a 100-mile race. And because of lockdown and all of that, the race got cancelled and it went virtual. So I said, well, look, I'm going to get the Peloton bike and I'm going to do 100 miles in my bedroom. And so I did that. And so I love it. I love my Peloton bike.
Yeah, I do cycling along Nice seafront, and I look at all the apartments as we go by and say, one of those is the Airbnb I was supposed to have stayed in June. So what about those days where you get to live more, and that's where I talk about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do? What do those days look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be travel for me. You know, I invest a lot in travel, and often that travel is work related. If I'm being honest, I spent a week with Lisa Nichols, who's a life coach in the US. I went out to Mexico and spent a week on a ranch with her and you know, some other people. And I do a lot of travel for business, but that lights me up. I do a lot of personal development work, and I get to see the world. And it used to be running. It used to be, you know, I'd travel the world and run marathons. I'm not so keen on doing that anymore. I'm like, I still want to travel, but maybe I won't run.
At the running.
Yeah. And
More
I
like
used to
my
just,
sort of thing.
I used to say yes to everything. I'd get phone calls from PR companies that would say, you know, we'll pay for you. We'll send you out to Jerusalem to run the Jerusalem half marathon. You know, no expense spared. And I'd go, yay. And then I'd get to the start line and go, actually, I'm not sure this is a good deal here. Like, I still have to run 13.1 miles, and you know, Jerusalem is built on 7 hills. Who knew that? I didn't really know that until I got there. So
you could have just stayed in Sheffield. I think that's 7 as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been easing back on the running, and I want to find other adventures and to allow myself to say, do you know what? Why don't I book a trip that isn't about work and just find new ways to live?
Yes.
So it's always about kind of pushing the boundaries of kind of what I will allow myself to receive.
Lovely. Thank you, Julie. It's been so cool talking to you today. Really enjoyed it, and I just love your that whole attitude around the coming last bit, you know, and flipping it all the time. I just think it's permeated the whole interview. So thank you. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
Sure. So just do a Google search for Julie Creffield. My website is juliecreffield.com.
Lovely. Thank you. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I've had a blast.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 187, then you'll find them there. And this week I want to make you an offer. I have some slots in my diary between now and Christmas that I'm giving over to having a call with you as a gift to help you to think about your Power to Live More moving into 2021. So as you know, power is all around productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience, and living more is all about getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. It's been a bit of an odd year, as we all know, and I guess you've probably been thinking about how you run your business and what that's enabled you to do and what that has stopped you doing. And I think, you know, we always head into a new year and start to think about what we're going to do differently next year. The sort of planning comes to the fore, and we, you know, plan in what will hopefully be a better year for us next year. Well, let's hope it is, because it's been a bit of a weird in all sorts of ways this year. But if you're starting to think about your planning for next year, and if you're feeling stuck in your business, if you feel like there's some areas that you could do with some help with, you just want somebody to talk through some of those challenges with you, then I'd really encourage you to book in and have a chat with me. It's completely complimentary, i.e. free, and there's no obligation to do anything with me moving forwards. Obviously, I'll talk to you about my membership site in a bit more detail if you're interested, if you want to take things forwards from there. But the idea of the sessions are to give you some tangible actions that you can take so that you can really move forwards into 2021 with a good sense of well-being, with great productivity, and without the overwhelm, the lack of focus, and any of the other areas that might be causing you to feel stuck in your business at the moment. So I'd really encourage you to take action quickly. There are only limited slots. My diary is a bit of a nightmare, and I've jiggled things around a bit so that there are a series available at the moment, but there aren't many. So if you do want to speak to me, then I'd encourage you to go to powertolivemore.com / call, and you can book in. And then once you've booked in, I'll send you a Zoom link, and I'll send you a link to a short Google form just to ask you a bit of extra information to give me time to prepare a bit before we speak. And then I look forward to speaking to you. Again, it's powertolivemore.com / call. And do head over there right now if that's something that's of interest to you.
And the show notes for this week's show, again, are at powertolivemore.com/187. And we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.